Introducing Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Icon of the Seas, the ultimate family vacation. The ultimate 6 slides, 8 neighborhoods, 0 compromise vacation. The ultimate never done that, can't wait to do it vacation. The ultimate chillin' by a different pool every day of the week vacation. This is the Icon of Vacations. Icon of the Seas, arriving in 2024. Book today. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
This episode is brought to you by Pepsi Wild Cherry. Pepsi Wild Cherry is bursting with delicious cherry flavor and a sweet, crisp taste that gives you more to go wild for. Getting wild may look different these days, but whether it's opting for a solo Friday binge watch or a big night out, everyone can indulge in their wild side with Pepsi Wild Cherry. Also available in 0 sugar. So grab a Pepsi Wild Cherry and get wild.
Hello there, Duke fans, and welcome to episode 534 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. It is Monday, September 11th, 2023. And, as we kind of, first of all, welcome you in, I know this is kind of a solemn day of remembrance for all of us here in America of the events that happened 22 years ago. My name is Donald Wine. I'm here with Jason Evans. Jason, first of all, good afternoon to you. And I know we're leading again with kind of some solemn news, or at least solemn reflection. Just want to hand the floor to you for anything you want to say about it.
Yeah, I forget. I think I probably have told this story on this podcast in the past, but we have new listeners all the time, folks who maybe haven't heard all 530 plus previous episodes. I was in a pretty unique place on September 11th back in 2001. I was at CNN, actually in the control room for CNN Headline News. I was an executive producer at the time, and I was sort of the most experienced guy in the newsroom. So I was the one who took over, and I was what we call calling the live. I was in charge of the control room as the second plane hit the World Trade Center tower, which was the moment that transformed our perception of what was going on in the world. When the first plane hit, no one realized that this was something intentional. And it was that second plane that transformed the story and transformed all our lives. So I've got some very distinct memories of everything that happened in those moments. And it's something that I think of often, but especially on this day. And Donald, I'll freely say that I still, to this day, 20 plus years later, cannot help but tear up a little when I think about the heroes who raced into those buildings, the firefighters and police who raced in to help people who they probably knew mostly couldn't be helped. And they also knew they were going into a situation that would probably cause their death. And I like I said, I get broken up even thinking about the firefighters. It's, there's a reason we have such great respect for those people in our country. I don't know if I could do what they did. And this is definitely a day to remember them.
Yeah, and I live in Washington D.C. I'm not in D.C. right now, but normally I am on this holiday. It's always very, mostly a surreal experience. For me, it's kind of personal in 2 ways. One, my dad was in Washington on that day. He was at the Capitol on his way to the Pentagon when the Capitol went into lockdown, and then they were eventually evacuated because they thought that Flight 93 was headed towards the Capitol, and we found out later that was true. And I was on campus at Duke when this happened, and learning about that took about 2 days for me to get a hold of my dad. To this day, still 2 of the most terrifying days of my life. But also, I lost a friend in the South Tower on that day. It was the second day of work. His name was Ted Adderley. He was a high school track teammate of mine, and I always think about him on this day. I think about his family, and think about all the families that kind of they had to deal with this, not just on this day, but every day since then. And so, yeah, Jason, I thank you for your words, and I think leading with the show, it seemed appropriate on this day to kind of start with that and kind of say, hey, this is still something that we have to think about. This is still something that we should reflect on and honor those that we lost. And continue to, do what we do, because they put, a lot of people put themselves in harm's way so that we can do this show and we can do other things in our lives. So
yeah.
So in that spirit, we continue on. And Jason, I want to start with Duke football. We are the Duke basketball roundup, but lately we've been the Duke football roundup as well, because Duke football hangs another W in the W column, 42-7 over Lafayette last weekend. And Jason, I didn't get a chance to watch a lot of this game, but I do know it started out kind of shaky. It was 7-7 at the end of the first quarter, and then we slowly pulled away. And Jason, I do want to lead with one stat. We had our quarterbacks, Riley Leonard and Henry Beelan IV. They set a record. They're the first quarterback duo since 1996 to pass for 100 yards each and have 100% completion rate. They did not miss a pass. That's pretty cool. So, Jason, I want to kick it to you. What did you see last weekend from the Blue Devils as they beat the Lafayette Leopards?
Well, first of all, there should be a little tiny asterisk on that passing stat, because Riley Leonard did have an incompletion. He had one pass that was missed, but it was wiped out because of a weird, jumping over the lineman penalty, like this defensive guy for Lafayette.
Hey, penalties don't count, Jason.
I know, but it was a strange penalty. I was like, what kind of, that's kind of a weird one. But it wiped out a play. That was the one time that Riley Leonard went back to pass, released the ball, and it struck dirt instead of striking, instead of sticking in the hands of a Duke receiver. You mentioned this at the outset. I'm going to call it like it is. This was both a sloppy and uninspired effort from Duke for most of the first quarter. We allowed Lafayette to just march downfield on their opening drive. We fumbled on our very next possession. I don't want to say that I thought Duke was in danger of losing this game. Like on ESPN's game tracker, I think Duke never dips below about 95%, 97% to win the game. But I was concerned just at how poorly it looked like we were playing all the way through the middle of the second quarter. I mean, there was a big moment in the second quarter when the score was 7-7 and Lafayette had the ball, and we stopped them on a 4th and 1 in our territory that looked like Lafayette had. I sort of thought they'd made the first down. They got a non-charitable spot by the official. Duke got the ball back. We started marching, and we came up with our own 4th and 1 that we converted, where I thought we got kind of a charitable spot. I mean, if I was a Lafayette fan, if we were doing the Lafayette, football report right now, or roundup, I should say, I would be screaming about those two calls, because it felt to me a little bit like Lafayette got the short end of the stick on both of them. Not egregious. It wasn't terrible, but, maybe a tiny, tiny bit of home cooking for Duke. But anyway, so midway through the second quarter there, 7-7, we're trading 4th downs. I was just really unimpressed with what Duke was doing. And then suddenly the team went, oh, wait, we're pretty good. Lafayette is, not a Power 5 team, and we're going to take care of business here. And, the positive are, of course, Duke never punted the entire game. The final 2/3 of the game.
You called it, Jason. You called it last week on the pod. You said, hey, yes, I don't think we're going to hear this guy's name, and you're right.
That's right. I said we wouldn't have any punts. Yeah. I said we'd only have maybe one punt. I was one too many. But I was really impressed with our run game. The final 2/3 of the game, we, Waters and Moore were basically able to run almost unstoppably. They were averaging 7, 8, 10 yards per carry. Duke ended up racking up 261 total yards of rushing, right around 6 yards per rush. Those are big, big numbers. And I thought our defense, after that opening drive by Lafayette, our defense was very strong. We did a really nice job of clogging the run lanes against a team that had rushed for over 200 yards the week before. So I was impressed with the defensive effort more than the offensive effort. And Donald, one last thing. Look, I know these guys have been around for a few years. I want to apologize because I continue to get confused by who is who. The fact that 3 of Duke's top offensive players are Jordan Waters, Jordan Moore, and Jaquez Moore. I'm sorry, man. Sometimes I'm just like, wait, what happened to that? I apologize to those guys, but man, their names, they sound really similar when coming over an ESPN stream.
Well, you also like on their jerseys, like especially for Jordan and Jaquez, they have the J-O more and then the J-A more. And the A kind of looks like the O when you're kind of looking at it by glance. So you have to memorize numbers. And then they have similar numbers. So it's like you have to kind of make sure you're on the same page with that because otherwise you're going to get confused. So I get it.
Yeah. Jordan Moore, by the way, had a really nice game at wide receiver, had a couple, nice balls that he hauled in. Our wide receivers weren't asked to do a lot in this game. We've talked about, the passing. And I actually think to some extent, the biggest thing to come out of this game is that Duke fans really got to know our backup quarterback, who is just a redshirt freshman in Henry Beelan. And, admittedly, Lafayette, not the toughest opponent. And I hope there will be many other opportunities where Duke has comfortable leads and we're able to see more of Henry Beelan throughout the rest of this season. But it seems pretty likely that Riley Leonard will be headed off to the NFL after this year. And I feel like, credit to coach, once again, Duke has found, looks like another nice future potential quarterback in Henry Beelan. He looked excellent in this game.
Yeah. Again, moving the ball down the field, it doesn't have to be, 40, 50 yards at a time, but even just, again, completing passes, the fact that the two combined for 100% is great because it means the ball was moving forward every single time they threw the ball, which is what you want. And Jason, I remember last week, when we were talking about this game, we were talking about how Lafayette's not that good, right? And that I believe the spread at kickoff was 42.5. And I was like, that's a big spread. For me, like us, we're still in the mentality, the three of us, like we're still in the mentality that when Duke scores 40 points, that's a lot of points. So for a spread to be 42.5, I was like, I'm not necessarily concerned about the spread. But here again, they kept them under 7. There was that one drive again in the first quarter that Lafayette scored. That was it. Our defense locked down from there. They scored 42 points. That they didn't look, again, perfect doing it. But in the end, when you look at that scoreline, if you'd see nothing about this game, you go, hey, Duke took care of business against Lafayette. And that's what we want. Because as we look ahead, Jason, to Saturday, we have Northwestern coming to town, which is, again, a team that is decent. They are going through a lot of issues within the program. But at the same time, they are still a tough team that has given us fits every single time. And Duke fans should be very familiar with the Northwestern Wildcats on the gridiron because we seemingly play them every year or every other year. So, Jason, when you look ahead to Northwestern, what do you take from this Lafayette game that you hope can be corrected or fixed or at least be a little bit more towards perfect on Saturday?
Well, look, there are things that we noted against Clemson, in terms of Duke's offensive line, in terms of some penalties that bothered us. There were things that Duke could have, I think, worked on a little bit more. I don't know that the fact that we maybe cleaned some of that stuff up against against Lafayette says a lot because of who Lafayette is. No offense to them, but they're not a Power 5 team like Northwestern is, and like virtually everyone else that Duke is going to play the rest of this year. Even UConn, who is not a Power 5 team, but it's still they're a higher tier program than a Lafayette. So I feel like the issues that I saw against Clemson are things that I still am concerned about and want to see Duke clean up against Northwestern. It is worth noting, Donald, that a year ago, Duke played Northwestern. It was a very competitive game. Duke, I want to say we won by 8. I forget the final score, but I believe we won by 8. And that would go on to be a really bad Northwestern team. They went 1-11 on the season. So, it's easy to look at this game and go, oh, Northwestern isn't that good again this year. But they played Duke very competitive. A Duke team that would go on to win 9 games only beat a Northwestern team that won 1 game by 8 points a year ago. So you got to be concerned anytime you're playing them. Donald, have you seen what the line is on this game? I was shocked at the line.
Not yet.
Oh, you ready for it?
Mm-hmm.
Let me go ahead and guess. What do you think the line should be on a Duke Northwestern game in Wally Wade?
I'd say Duke by 7.
Okay. 7, and maybe because it's at home, you go to 10. I saw a line that was Duke by 20.5. That's what Caesars has as the line.
I don't like that.
That's a big,
I really don't.
That is a big old line. That speaks to me of some real respect for Duke. And also it talks about how in shambles the Northwestern program is. You mentioned this is a team, we're not going to get into all of it, but this is a team going through some serious off-field issues. The coach is gone. There are going to be a lot of players that are going to be gone. The administration is trying to figure out how to deal with, frankly, some bad scandals within the program. So, I mean, wow, it is, it's a program that is trying to ignore what's happening off the field and just focus by what's happening on the field. So far, it looks like that's not working that great for them. They opened their season by playing Rutgers, and they were rolled by Rutgers 24-7. Rutgers is not a super strong college football team, and they handled Northwestern fairly easily. Northwestern came back last week and played a pretty bad UTEP team and beat them 38-7, which is an impressive score against anybody. But it's worth noting that game was only 7-7 at halftime, and that Northwestern sort of turned it on in the second half against again that bad UTEP team. Their quarterback, I just want to mention this. I think this is kind of cool. The quarterback's a guy named Ben Bryant. I'm going to tell you where Ben Bryant has played his football in his career. So he played 3 years at Cincinnati. Then he went to Eastern Michigan for a year. He finally got a chance to start there. Did a pretty good job at Eastern Michigan. So he transferred back to Cincinnati. And he was the starter at Cincinnati last year. And now he's at Northwestern. Yet, do your math. That is 6 years. He has been playing college football for 6 seasons now. He's mobile. He's not afraid to tuck it and run a little bit. He doesn't tend to throw the ball downfield all that much. He's mostly, a short to mid-range kind of quarterback. And the interesting thing about Ben Bryant is he got shaken up late in that UTEP game. And I haven't heard any reports as to whether or not he's going to play against Duke. And if he doesn't play, they've got like 3 or 4 different backup quarterbacks. Like in their 2 games this year, when Bryant comes out, they've got like a whole bunch of different guys that come in and play. So it's not clear who the backup quarterback would be. It's kind of a weird situation for them. The other thing to note about Northwestern is they've got a running back named Cam Porter, who in his career has never fumbled the ball. Well over 200 carries in his career, and he's never gotten a fumble. He's also never rushed the ball for more than 30 yards. This is a classic grind it out kind of guy. Stats are pretty underwhelming. There's a reason Vegas says Duke's a 20-point favorite. I don't know. Look, if you asked me to put my money down, I probably would say 20 is a little bit too much. But Duke should be a solid, 2 touchdown kind of pick in this game. And you would expect that after a Lafayette game that, like I said, was kind of sloppy at times, that with a full week to prepare, because Duke did not have much time to prepare for Lafayette, with a full week to prepare, I would expect the Blue Devils to be able to fairly comfortably take care of Northwestern.
For me, Jason, the line doesn't respect the history between these two schools, right? Like when we talk about these particular 2 teams, and again, we've played Northwestern a lot over the last 20 years. And it seems like every time there's 2 words that the game comes down to: turnover battle. Every single time this game happens, it feels like one of these teams goes off and gets a couple of picks or gets a couple of fumbles, and that ends up being the difference in this game. Well, last year, I'm pretty sure it was, I think it was an interception or a fumble that we were able to pick up, and that was the difference in holding them to within 8 points. And so I look at this and say, yes, we've been doing great at making sure that we, limit the turnovers. Under Mike Elko, the number of turnovers have gone way down, and the number of turnovers that we actually produce has gone up. I want that to continue. And against Clemson, I thought we did well at taking care of the football and at taking the ball away from Clemson and, as we talked about, ruining a lot of their, red zone opportunities. I want to do the same against Northwestern, because Northwestern is going to grind and pound you, and they're going to try and get you all the way down into the red zone and try to punch it in for a touchdown. We need to make sure that we are stopping them third down situations, make sure that we pack the line. And at the end of the day, I think, 20 points may not be great. I'll be happy with a 7 to 10 point win, because that feels like is what happens every time we play Northwestern, obviously with a few exceptions, that this game is one of those games that in the fourth quarter is still in doubt and someone has to make a big play. So far this season, Duke has been making those big plays. I hope that continues against Northwestern on Saturday.
Amen, brother. Hey, we've got some basketball to talk about after the break, don't we?
Yes, we do. So you know what? Let's take that break. Let's breathe. We'll get the football out of the way. And now when we come back, it's a lot of basketball to talk about, but mainly we'll talk about the international game. And then maybe we'll talk about Vegas. A little of that after this. All right, we are back and we shift gears to the basketball court, but not the Duke basketball court. There are some Duke players involved, but we're going international, ladies and gentlemen. We are going to the FIBA World Cup, which just wrapped up this past weekend. And the United States did not win. They didn't finish second either. They didn't finish third either. They finished fourth, ladies and gentlemen, which is a rare sight. We've seen it recently in the FIBA World Cup where they have failed to not win this thing, but to fail the medal was kind of a twist and turn of events. They had lost against Lithuania to end the group stage, and then came back and stormed into the semifinals, and everyone thought, yo, this is going to be a pretty good team. Then we get to the semifinals. We're facing Germany. We're down quite a bit, and we storm back in the fourth quarter. We get close. We get to the point where it's a ball game, and then somehow we end up losing that game that would have sent us at least to the gold medal game. We then faced Canada, which a lot of people picked U.S.-Canada to be the final, but that was for the bronze. And again, it's a close game. The U.S. eventually goes down. They catch all the way back up. They tie the game on a ridiculous Mikal Bridges
4-point play. It's a 4-point play. It was crazy.
It was a 4-point play, but it was I think he channeled his inner Trey Jones on that play because he misses the free throw, grabs the rebound, and throws up a 3-pointer to win or to send it to overtime. And then they lose in overtime to Canada. So they fail to medal in the FIBA World Cup. Canada, RJ Barrett, shout out to RJ Barrett. He gets a bronze medal with Canada. But Jason, I want to talk about this because it has prompted some big time athletes who did not feature on this FIBA World Cup team to come out and say, yo, we're done with this. We're gonna come back next year in the Olympics and we're gonna show out. Guys like LeBron James, Dame Lillard. Talk to the people about some of the people who have said, yo, it's now our time. It's time to come back and shine.
Yeah. So, in the wake of the U.S. losing, we got word from Sam Charania or whatever. Sam's. Yeah. I can't ever pronounce his last name. One of the top NBA beat reporters out there. He says that LeBron specifically is working on putting together a superstar team for next summer's Summer Olympics about 10 months from now. That he's trying to get Steph Curry to be on it. Steph, by the way, has never played on an Olympic team. So this would be, if you're thinking about Steph Curry's trophy case, pretty much everything in that trophy case, with the exception of a gold medal from the Olympics. So you can understand why Steph would be like, yeah, I'm in, man. So apparently LeBron, Steph, Kevin Durant, Anthony Davis, Dame Lillard, you mentioned. Draymond Green apparently is involved in all this. Jason Tatum, the sort of, there are only a couple of young guys on this list of guys LeBron apparently is putting together. Tatum is one of them. Devin Booker is one of them. And then Kyrie Irving also has been mentioned as a guy who could be a part of it. So, it feels like the U.S. sort of trying to go back a little bit to the dream team, the super team kind of concept, as opposed to what we rolled out there in the World Cup, which was frankly a pretty flawed team. It was a team that really had no center. The only guy on that roster who plays center in the NBA on a regular basis was Walker Kessler. And Walker Kessler was really the last man off the bench. I think they sort of just put him on the team to give him a little bit of the international experience. Barely played in most games. So for the most part, this team was rolling out there with guys who are not centers trying to play center. And it just did not work very well at all. Defensive rebounds were a huge problem for this team. They were unable to stop teams on defense as a result of the poor defensive rebounding, and they also seemed to get stuck, and teams were shooting open 3-pointers against them a lot. As a result, virtually everyone that they played would score like their highest total of the tournament by playing the Americans. I mean, a lot of these games, our opponents were getting over 100 points, and these were with 10-minute quarters. So, that's a big number against what was supposed to be a good defensive team. Paulo Banchero was on Team USA, and he looked very good. He played some small ball center at times, and that seemed to work fairly well for him. It was a team that frankly had too many guys who needed the ball in their hands. I mean, Anthony Edwards, Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Halliburton, and Brandon Ingram were all on this team. I don't know how those four guys all need the ball in their hands like all the time. And I don't know how, you would expect them to play together. It just doesn't work that well. Frankly, I thought role players, dirty work guys like Josh Hart and Mikal Bridges were two of the best players in this team, two of the most effective players in this team, because they didn't need the ball in their hands all the time. Frankly, Paulo was the same kind of situation, played pretty well because he could feed off of these other guys. So, I think the U.S. needs to understand that we have to go back to the model that Coach K had. There's a reason that Coach K went 70-something and won in his international coaching career, while Steve
and he's
Kerr
still pissed about the one. Like,
yeah. Steve Kerr lost 3 games in his very first tournament. Pops lost, I think it was 2 or 3 games in his very first tournament. We need to go back to the model that Coach K had, where he was like, look, if you're going to be on my Olympic team, you're going to practice with me for a couple of years in advance. We're going to figure this out so that we play like a team, that we're not just a collection of all-stars, because the rest of the world is really catching up. I mean, you mentioned Canada. The Canadian team that beat the U.S. and won the bronze medal in this tournament, next year for the Olympics,
they brought everybody.
They're going to add Jamal Murray, by the way, arguably the best player. Him or Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They're going to add him next year. They're going to be really good. France is going to be really good. It's entirely possible, by the way, that Joel Embiid may decide to play for the U.S. He could decide to play for France. Can you imagine if France rolls out there with Rudy Gobert, Joel Embiid, and what's his name? The Victor Wembanyama. I couldn't spit out Wembanyama.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine that size on a front line? I mean, wow. And then there's
going to
Germany.
Figure out a way to play Nick Batum. That's how it works.
And then there's Germany that went undefeated in this FIBA World Cup and won the whole thing behind Dennis Schroeder and Franz Wagner. Wagner looked great, by the way. He's Paulo Banchero's teammate on the Orlando Magic, and he and Paulo are going to be a really great combination for years to come. But he looked fabulous for Germany in this tournament. It is not going to be easy, even if we get LeBron and Steph and KD and AD and Tatum and everybody else. It is still going to be tough for the U.S. if we don't start putting teams together logically and have them work together for more than, a few weeks before rolling out there and expecting that they can beat everybody.
Right. And if you remember during the Olympics in 2020 or 2021, I should say, when they actually did them, you had 2 guys on the plane directly from the NBA finals to play in the first game.
Yeah.
Because that's how close it was. And, that's where we kind of lose a couple guys. Jason, I agree with you. First of all, I think the commitment portion that Coach K kind of adhered to, saying, hey, I need you to commit to 3 summers, 2 weeks for 2 summers, and then the Olympics. Like, I need you to do this first because this is the way we gel as a team. And that way we know how we work as a team, so we can plug in guys and everyone's still on the same page. I think that part kind of went by the wayside when he left the USA basketball program. But Jason, here's another thing that was pointed out. There were 8 Americans on the first, second, and third team All-NBA. None of them were on this World Cup roster. There was a first team All-Defense. Only Jaren Jackson Jr. was on this roster. So there was no Drew Holiday, no Mobley, no Brook Lopez, no Caruso. Like, those guys who are able to put, again, lockdown defense, because that's how you win these games. Yeah, you need the offense, but you also need the guys who are just going to be like, I don't need to score 30 points. I want to get 20 rebounds and 10 blocks, because the rules are a little bit different. You can do that and block with a little bit more ease and a little bit more reckless abandon in the international game. So it's going to be interesting how these guys work together. And when you see some of these stars come together, this is something that happens a lot afterwards when everyone loses, like, no, we're not going to do this again. All these guys end up coming out of the woodwork, but that's going to create competition. And I want that competition to return, because Coach K was like, hey, I want you guys to accept the fact that you, sir, are the 10th best player or the 12th best player in the world. And you may not be on this team, because we need to fill a team, and all these guys need to be, gelling together. And that may involve you playing for the World Cup and not the Olympic team. So I like the fact that we're probably going to have some competition next summer for these 12 spots. And I want that competition to commence as soon as the season starts. I want these guys to be ready, and again, to be bought into the commitment that, hey, if we want to go for a gold medal, it starts now. It doesn't start next summer when the NBA season finishes up.
Yeah. And I'll add one other thing. I want to be clear that I'm not saying the guys that we picked for the World Cup this year are losers. My gosh, I would never begin to say that. But if you look at the collective NBA record of these guys, these are not guys who play on teams that go deep in the playoffs. mean, the best player on the team was Anthony Edwards, plays for a Minnesota club that has struggled to even make the playoffs for many, many years.
Only won one playoff series ever.
Yeah.
So,
Tyrese Halliburton, a nice player, but not a guy who's gone deep in the playoffs. Paulo Banchero, never even played in the playoffs. On and on I can go with the guys on this team. And there are a lot of guys who maybe make the first round of the playoffs, but don't really get out of it. I want to see Team USA have guys like Jimmy Butler who understand, oh, the pressure's on. I refuse to lose. I will not allow my team to lose. I want guys like that on this team. And frankly, when you start mentioning names like LeBron and Steph and Draymond, then you get, and Tatum, then you're getting, and Booker, as I think of each one of them, I'm like, okay, that's another guy. These are the guys who always seem to be playing at the end of the playoffs, always. So again, not the talent of the guys who are playing on this team. Jermaine Jackson Jr. is a great player, great defensive player, not a rebounder, great defensive player. A lot of these guys have shown that they have great NBA futures, but they ain't there yet. And I want winners representing Team USA.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens as we go forward. Because again, I think you're going to have a lot of players come out and say that they want to play in this thing, and I think that's going to create the competition that will, again, that pressure situation. Pressure makes diamonds. They've always said that. We have a bunch of diamonds on this team, and I want to make sure that when it comes time that they understand that the target's always going to be on the back of the United States because we are the best team. Even if we're not playing as the best team, everyone wants to beat us. And once we embrace that, just like Duke, right? Whenever we're the number one team, we always say, hey, it does not matter if we're 1 or 21. Everyone sees Duke across our chest and they want to beat us. It's the same thing for the United States on the international level. And once we embrace that once again, I think we're an unstoppable team and say, all right, let's go out and take on the world.
Well, so I'll take a little bit of umbrage with that, because I actually think one thing that we should recognize is the world has very, very much caught up. And
yes.
And we could send our best. They could play pretty well. And there are still international teams that can very much give them a game. And these tournaments are one and done. This is not like the NBA where you're playing best out of 5 or best out of 7. Mm-hmm. It's one and done. And frankly, there are several teams that even if the US sends their best, they could win in a one and done situation. So, I think that's a good thing. That's what we want.
That's where
we want the sport to grow. It's great that the best players in the NBA right now, a lot of them are international players. The best player in the world right now, Nikola Jokic, is an international player. He's not an American. And I think that's good for the growth of the game. I'm all for it. And I love for the Olympics and the World Cup to be more and more competitive so that the U.S. has to send our best, and that even when we send our best, there's some uncertainty about the games. It will make more people tune in. It will make for more exciting basketball, and I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a year to the Olympics, and it feels like we're already ready for it. So maybe the DBR should go cover some games over in Paris. So, have a baguette, watch some basketball. I'm with that. Before we get out of here, there is another tournament that we need to talk about, and it's on a lesser scale than the FIBA World Cup. It is a Vegas tournament that has been proposed by Fox Sports. It would take place between the Elite 8 and the Final 4 in Las Vegas at T-Mobile Arena, and it would involve 16 teams from the Big 12, the Big East, and the Big 10. This is kind of the teams who did not make the NCAA tournament from those 3 conferences kind of coming together for a 1-week 16-team tournament to kind of get them some extra games. Now, Jason, I just want to start off by saying why this won't work. This is not going to work. There's many reasons why this is not going to work. Here's one, Jason. I just want you to go back a year to last spring, the 2023 NCAA tournament. Do you know how many teams from the Big East, the Big 12, and the Big 10 did not make the NCAA tournament?
Tell me.
15. So we don't even have a full 16-team roster. When you factor in conference expansion, because this is going to take place after all this expansion starts next year, you're still looking at 18 teams, of which 2 of them were DePaul and Georgetown. And if you saw DePaul or Georgetown play, I saw Georgetown play live. Let me tell you, Jason, you don't need to see that in Vegas. You only need to see that in their own home gyms. The interesting thing about this is that it's a way to they're trying to obviously compete with the NIT. That 15 teams I said that didn't make the NCAA tournament, that's factoring in that if all 15 of those teams said, no, we're not doing the NIT, we're going to do this particular tournament in Vegas instead. The NIT is still going to pluck away a couple of teams. But Jason, do you know who won the NIT last year?
I have no memory of it.
Neither do I. That's the point. They're trying to come up with something that's going to compete against the NIT in a world where everyone is focused on everything but the NIT. They're focused on the NCAA tournament at that point, and especially between the Elite Eight and the Final Four, it rivals Super Bowl coverage. We have wall-to-wall NCAA Final Four coverage from the moment the Final Four set after that last Elite Eight game to the tip-off of the first game. That's all you hear about. You don't even hear about baseball opening up. You don't hear about the NBA or the NHL entering their final weeks of the season. It's wall-to-wall NCAA tournament coverage. So this is why I don't think this is going to work. It's because, one, they don't have enough teams that are going to really tell people, oh, my God, this is going to be a nice tournament. But also, no one cares. No one cares about the tournaments that exist in the postseason that aren't the NCAA tournament. No one cares barely about any sport during the month of March except for the NCAA tournament. And I'm not sure what Fox is trying to do here or what these conferences are trying to do, but it seems like an exercise in futility to me.
All right, so a couple things about this tournament. First of all, just because I'm sure everyone out there is wondering, why are the ACC and the SEC and the Pac-12 not involved in this? Well, first of all, Pac-12 is not involved because the Pac-12 is probably not going to exist in a year.
They're gone. Yeah.
Or if it exists, it's going to be in some weird bastardized form where they sort of do a reverse merger with the WAC or Mountain West or one of those conferences. In any event, that's why the Pac-12 is not involved. The reason the ACC and the SEC aren't involved is that this is being done through Fox Sports, and the ACC and the SEC have deals with ESPN to pretty much exclusively carry their content. There's a reason why there's an ACC network and an SEC network, and those two networks are, partnerships with ESPN, and those two conferences have no deals with Fox Sports, which is why this is only being proposed for the Big East, Big 12, and the Big 10. I'm inclined to largely agree with you that this is not going to be something that's going to, get a lot of attention from people. I do think it might be a little more attractive than the NIT, though, for a couple reasons. One of them is by picking big major conference teams like this, you avoid, and I'm not saying this has to do with merit, but I'm just saying in terms of fan interest, there's more fan interest in a lower tier Big Ten team than there is in, the top team from the Colonial that didn't make the NCAA tournament, or the Southern Conference, or, any number of other conferences that send their like regular season champions to the NIT. And, again, it's got nothing to do with whether those teams deserve to be in a postseason tournament or not, but there are more people who are aware of what's going on with Minnesota basketball or Vanderbilt basketball, just because they're much bigger programs than those smaller tier teams. The other thing I think it has working in its advantage is the proposal here from Fox is that the entire tournament, all the teams, would be played in Las Vegas. And by doing that, they turn it into, a localized event. And I think that's a really interesting idea. It's something that I think the NIT should have maybe toyed with at an earlier date. I do wonder a little bit about how they're going to do their schedule, because they say they're going to do this in the 1 week between the grade 8 and the start of the Final Four. Well, if you have 16 teams, the championship team's got to play 4 games. They're going to play 4 games in 1 week? That seems like it's
kind of like a conference tournament.
That's a really it's a very robust schedule for them. But to me, the single most interesting thing about this tournament is this. The Fox executives who are putting this together say that they are going to strongly encourage the sponsors, the event sponsors, the people who are buying commercial time, people who are putting their names and logos and such inside the arenas. They're going to encourage those teams to set up NIL deals for all the players involved in this tournament. Because one of the problems you potentially have with this tournament is because they're doing it several weeks later in March, a lot of players on these teams probably would have okay, I'm declaring for the NBA draft. Okay, I'm entering the transfer portal. They would sort of, their season ends. They didn't go to the NCAA tournament. in some cases, they probably didn't go to the NIT, and they're like, all right, I'm out of here. I'm done. I'm moving on to what's next in my basketball career. And this is a way, by providing them with some NIL incentive, this is a way to keep these guys involved with their programs to play in this tournament. Now, look, whether this tournament works or not, that idea, that concept is a game changer, potentially, for NIL and for the way college programs get put together. If you begin to convince sponsors that in addition to playing the game, in addition to putting commercials and television stuff regarding the game itself, that they should also engage specifically with players, I mean, you're coming awful close to pay for play then at that point. And this is, to me, feels like yet another moment where we're seeing NIL creep more and more into college basketball. It is, frankly, it is not anywhere close to being an amateur sport anymore. And it's really going to become, I think, a completely professional sport, not immediately, but in the next couple of years. I don't see a way that the schools and the NCAA are going to continue to not pay the players. If you continue to have deals like this, where it feels like players are getting played, but players are getting paid by everyone except the teams and the universities. And frankly, I think that barrier is going to be broken sometime soon.
Yeah, and that may have something to do with it. I think when you're looking at the transfer portal and things like that, or declaring for the draft, like, guys are doing that anyway. There's some guys who are doing that during the NIT, and there's some teams that won't accept the postseason invite if it's not the NCAA tournament. Hello, UNC. Like, those are still real possibilities that teams may go, hey, we got guys that are hurt. We got, I hate to say it, but COVID is out there still. Like, there's been a little outbreak there. Like, there's a lot of factors that can determine whether a team actually takes these invites. And a little NIL money may not be enough for some of these players, because they say, hey, look, I just want to move on with the rest of my career. I want to transfer. I want to do whatever. I want to get past the season. And Jason, when we're looking at some of these records, we're talking about some really bad basketball teams. We're not talking about teams that are, just missing the cut at the NCAA tournament. We're talking about teams who are under 500 in conference, under 500 for the regular season, and are losing to some terrible teams. And so from the fan standpoint, yeah, it's in Vegas, there's glitz and glamour involved in it, but what happens when you put, a third, product in Vegas? It's just a third product in Vegas. And, some of this basketball is going to be really bad. Believe me, I've watched a lot of it, and it's not going to be good basketball. And that's not going to really encourage a lot of people to tune in and watch, which is the whole point of this. It's supposed to be an alternative to the NIT. And like you said, you and I, we watch as much college basketball as the next person. And neither of us can recall who won the NIT, nor do we care, right? Because the rest of the public does not care about it at that time of year. So it's going to be interesting to see if they actually go through with it. Also, honestly, with the NIL stuff, the NCAA is going to have to come in and regulate what sort of things like this is, because if that's cool to do what you just said, what they're planning on doing, if that's cool, what happened with Chicago, man? Like, we go back to Chicago? Like, so there's still like, you're still like, that's cool. This thing is okay. This thing is not. And that's up there, like you said, is very close to, hey, pay for play. Just come to this tournament. You're going to get some NIL money. And I feel like the NCAA is going to need to step in and be like, look, guys, no, this is not the way you're proposing. This is not how it's going to fly. It's also Las Vegas. No, we're not doing this. So there's still a lot of things that have to be worked out with this. It's an interesting proposition, but I think we both pointed out a few reasons why it could work and a few reasons why it may not work. So I guess we got to wait and see what those conferences do. But in the span of Duke, we don't have to worry about Vegas, except that we're playing there against Gonzaga or some other team in the NCAA tournament. So Jason, is that it? Anything else from you?
There was one little tiny item, and we really don't need to spend a lot of time on it, but I do want everybody to be aware of it because it may impact things down the road. North Carolina, UNC, has hired a guy named TJ Beisner, who was previously at Kentucky, and he was in charge of Kentucky's men's basketball NIL operation. We were talking about NIL a moment ago, and Carolina has hired this guy away. They say that he's going to begin working with an outside firm to oversee all the NIL deals for UNC players, and it's going to be his job to build out an NIL collective at UNC that will help provide robust deals for North Carolina basketball players. This is a big deal. There's no two ways to put it. This is going to facilitate North Carolina making even more lucrative offers to potential recruits, to guys to maybe stick around the program and the such. And it's worth noting that TJ Beisner, when he was at Kentucky, managed one of the most complicated and difficult NIL situations out there last year, when Oscar Tshiebwe was a player who very much deserved to make a lot of money. But it was a real challenge to get him money because he was in the U.S. on a student visa and was not allowed to be paid, directly while he was in the U.S. And so TJ Beisner was one of the guys who organized for Kentucky to do they did an exhibition or a game or something in the Bahamas, which is where Oscar Tshiebwe is from. And they apparently were able to figure out a way to get him paid over $1 million last year, even though Oscar Tshiebwe, again, was not allowed to collect money while he was in the U.S. So, again, because of student visa rules and things like that. It's probably a situation, by the way, that impacts TJ Power as well. But in any event, this is a guy who knows what he's doing when it comes to the NIL space. And I think, I'm not a Carolina fan. If I was a Carolina fan, I'd be really excited about this right now, because I think this could be a major moment for their program.
I mean, look, it's one of those things where, we have Rachel Baker on our side kind of organizing, name, image, and likeness for the Duke basketball team. We've had a couple, we've talked offline about, some of the boosters kind of getting together, both from on the basketball side and on the, football side, to try and, up the number of NIL opportunities for our student athletes. And this is something that's going to continue. I mean, it's no secret that this is going to go up and up. And as the NCAA tries to kind of figure this whole thing out, universities are like, we'll figure this out on our own. And so it only makes sense. It's smart. It's one of the smart things that UNC has done, is to bring in someone to kind of organize this on their behalf, because, that's going to be something that when we look at recruiting, NIL has become a big part of that, especially transfers and even guys who are coming out of high school. It's not just about, hey, classes and, being in this part of the country or playing for this team or playing on national TV. It's about some of the NIL opportunities that are available for them. And that is a way for UNC to continue to be in the game when it comes to some of the top recruits that they do go after.
Yeah, I very much look forward to the NCAA taking a little more control over NIL. I know that they don't want to, and they've resisted it staunchly, but it needs someone to control it, because we need, as fans and, as a sport, to have a better understanding of the reality of what's happening out there. I hear all kinds of stuff, and I vacillate between thinking, no one's really making more than $300,000-$400,000, and between thinking that there are schools that are handing out $1 million bags left and right. There is no transparency right now. I hear stuff. Boy, some of the stuff I've heard about Kansas lately. By the way, Cooper Flagg is coming to visit Duke for Countdown to Craziness. That'll be a lot of fun. Cooper Flagg is also going to be visiting Kansas. Kansas is going to have its hand out Kansas is going to stick out its hand to hand money to Cooper Flagg in a big way. There's no major program right now that is handing out money the way Kansas is. I've heard that from numerous sources. And there just needs to be some understanding of what's actually happening here. Because right now it is truly the wild, wild west. And, I think it's not just from the standpoint of fans, it's from the standpoint of players. They don't know what's going on, really. And I just think in terms of fairness and understanding, all the major pro sports, when they sign a contract, we know what they signed for. How come college is at the point now where we have no idea what's going on? Doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, I look forward to the NCAA resolving this on February 32nd, because that's when they're planning to do this. So, but until then,
February
32nd. If you don't know that date, neither does the NCAA.
Dude, that's so perfect. Yeah. I'm shaking my head, but it's so perfect.
It is what it is. That's the NCAA for you. But that will do it for episode 534 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for listening. Sam, we miss you. We'll catch you back soon. Sam will be on the episode very, very soon. But for Jason, I am Donald Blind. And now it is time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.